record to my computer. Here we go. All right. Just as a reminder, we do have some other A&R hours that are coming up in the next few months. If you're interested, the next one is March 16th at 9 o'clock, which they're talking about nuts and bolts of ponds by Stephen Patrick from Habersham County. That's always a good informative topic. I know I've already been getting several calls on ponds this year, and algae and everything else that's starting to show up in ponds, duckweed starting to really take off. So if you have any questions about that, that'd be a really good webinar to check out as well. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the mic over to Bob Westerfield. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul, and good morning, folks. Honored to be your first A&R update of the year, I guess. And it is kind of crazy times. We've had such warm spell. I heard you guys talking about everything that's beginning to bloom, and certainly, the garden centers have been pretty active. I've been seeing plenty of tomato plants and pepper plants and everything in the garden centers. I feel sorry for the poor folks that have planted those already, because they're going to lose them this weekend. I mean, even I heard your temperatures, even in middle Georgia, I live down in middle Georgia. We're supposed to hit the low 20s with a lot of wind on Saturday evening, I guess it is. So that's going to take out a lot of plants. And then, of course, you're going to get the questions, and then I will as well. So from a homeowner standpoint, primarily, a lot of people have already planted. I'll just remind you, to really be cognizant of the soil temperatures. We're not even close to being there yet. Most of the soil temperatures are in the 50s right now. And we really want to wait for particularly the solanaceous crops, the tomatoes and the peppers and things like that, till we hit, closer to 65 degrees. And in my opinion, we always get blasted in March with a cold front. So we're probably looking towards, at the earliest, first part of April in South Georgia, and Paul, where you are and above, more towards mid to late April, I'm thinking, on a lot of that planting. But anyway, today we're going to talk a little bit more upscale. And what we're talking about here is folks that might be looking to, do this stuff for profit. And it could be some of your homeowners, that are saying, hey, we grew so much last year, maybe we can sell a little bit of this. Or maybe it's someone who's wanting to get in a little bit larger scale. So we'll kind of go down the line. If you got questions, it's a small group, so just feel free to ask them as we go. And hopefully I can get this thing to, let's see. Okay, I'm hitting slide button, but not okay. There we go. Maybe it's running slow today. And I hadn't had his coffee yet. So hopefully you see this one, considerations for small market growers. These are for folks, I kind of looking at this talk, and I've done this talk before, but this is for, folks that are coming in your office and say, hey, I've got this great idea. I want to make a lot of money, whether I'm growing and selling produce, or, a lot of them will incorporate fruit into that operation as well. There are certainly some things you need to look at. And not only as one of the vegetable specialists, but I can tell you from a practical standpoint, because I've done this. We have marketed and sold vegetables for many years, including blueberries and fruit. Kind of pretty much now, I just enjoy teaching about it. I can tell you it is a lot of work. So you have to sort of feel out your clients and find out, are they really serious about this? Do they have a green thumb? Do they have the energy and the labor it's going to take to get this done? Or are they just playing with this? Maybe they want to make just a couple of dollars. So, that's kind of, you have to sort of feel out with a lot of questions to see where they're going with this. Certainly, you want to look at something that if you're going to get in it for profit, hey, how can I have income coming year round? Are there some things I can include in the fall vegetables? Some niche crops we'll look at. What are some of the tax advantages? And a lot of people will say, hey, I heard if you get into farming of any kind, you'll save a lot of money on taxes. Well, we've grown vegetables. I've got cattle on my farm, and I can tell you the tax thing isn't near what it used to be. We still pay a lot of taxes. So it's something I think, vegetables, I would only really encourage it to someone that enjoys doing that. If it's like they're just looking for a venture to make money in, and don't really enjoy so much the labor and being outside, I would steer them quickly to something else. So, the little bottom sentence there, is it just for fun? Is it going to be for their own intake food for the family, or is it for profit? Or maybe it's a combination of all three. And I think if it is a combination for all three, that's sort of a good green light to kind of go further with them and kind of help them out. When you talk about small market farming, whether it be fruits, vegetables, it's kind of an obscure definition. Certainly, if you go to South Georgia, we see some of these huge, row crop farms, tomatoes, hundreds of acres. So you can get some of that up in North Georgia as well. I'm talking about folks that have got anything less than 3 acres, all the way up to maybe 12 to 25 acres. And a 25-acre vegetable farm would be huge, depending on what type of equipment and labor you have. So I go to a lot of these. I visit these sites, troubleshoot, and so forth. And the majority of them are probably somewhere, I would say, between 2 to 5 acres in size. There are a few, I'm working with one over in Pine Mountain that's kind of a full-time operation, but most of them are either a part-time venture or, it's folks that kind of have gotten out of something, that are retired, and they're just trying to make a little bit of supplemental income. So, what you see out there and what you have approaching you could be all different facets. But again, a lot of it's going to be sort of, I want to do this on a part-time basis. I will say that there is a trend, maybe particularly like you said, with in light of the way the world's going, for younger couples to think, oh, we want a sustainable farm, we want to get into this, we want to have organic and this and that. And I'm seeing more interest in that. And some of these high energy folks can actually make it happen. But are you going to make a ton of money on it? I doubt it seriously, unless you're maybe growing something illegal. So, are they going to make money? Well, what about labor? We've got about a 1-acre garden at my house, my farm, and my wife and I, it's all we can do to stay up with that. In fact, I'm not even planning a lot of it this year. You start harvesting about 3 or 4 200-foot rows of okra, and that'll take you an hour and a half. Most people have no idea what's involved in the daily harvest of the spring and summer crop, let alone if you switch right over into the fall garden. So you have to be upfront with them about the number of hours it's going to take. It's not something you can plant. We have beef cattle as well. I mean, as long as we got the waters working, and there's pasture or hay out there, I mean, it's not like I have to watch them every second. Well, the vegetable garden, you do have to watch pretty regularly. Irrigation can have issues. You guys know about disease, insects, all this stuff can get you. And if it sounds like I'm trying to talk you to get you to talk your clients out of it, that is almost what I'm doing. I love vegetable gardening. I like to see people get into it, but so many jump into it not having any idea what's going to happen. Some other things is, what else is out there? Can you sell this crop? Do you have a lot of competition? Maybe you've got a farmer's market nearby where you could do well. I think the time for homegrown vegetables and fruits is good right now. There is a market for it. But most folks, again, are they willing to put in that investment of time and capital it takes to get things going? And that's the big question. So these are some questions you want to ask your clients. Have they thought about it? Maybe even gotten with, small business development, and have they come up with a plan for what they have? What do they have on site? So how much money can you make? I get this question quite a bit on new growers coming in. And I usually reference them and say, well, how much money can you afford to lose? It's kind of like the stock market. You're going to make very little, if any, money the first few years if you don't have a lot of stuff already in place. So a lot of the smaller growers, they may have inherited some land or some equipment, and that's a big plus. If you just bought 10 acres, 20 acres. And I knew we did this program at winter school, and there's this bare land out there that you want to get into fruit and vegetable production. You've got a long point before you're going to make profit, because you may have to get a tractor and implements, irrigation systems, and of course, everything that goes along with that. So it's going to take a while to make money. Can you make profit on 1 acre? Yeah, I think you probably could if you're careful on labor and so forth. You could maybe make $4,000 or $5,000 a year doing that, but you're not going to run a household on that. When you start approaching 5 acres or more, there are people that live off of that. Are they rich? No way. They can make a living. They eat well, but they're not making a ton of money when it comes to fruit and vegetables, I can tell you. There are some niche crops out there where people do pretty well, but at the end of the day, the average small farm operation, not making a ton of money. It's just very difficult to do. And of course, there's some organic options. I mentioned things like that have gotten in good with some restaurants that do quite well, but not many of them are driving Mercedes-Benz.
Bob, are you talking net or gross when you're talking these numbers?
Say that again.
Are you talking net or gross when you're saying 4,000? They can make 4,000, and then
I'm basically talking about net income after expenses, because it'll cost you a lot more than that, So that's what's possible. And again, that's just an estimate, because it could be all over the board. We had a grower over near LaGrange that claimed, and he had probably about a 2-acre garden, claimed he was making about 40,000 a year on the 2 acres. I found that hard to believe in seeing his operation, being over there a couple of times, but it is what it is. Some people will get confused on what net income is, the net income versus what it's costing you to operate that. But I was referring to profit, okay, like what you're going to take home. Does that make sense? All right.
yes, thank you.
Okay. So how do you get started in this stuff? What should you do? I certainly would want to check the market. I wouldn't want to get into any venture, whether it be vegetables or other, unless I knew I had a demand for it. I think statewide there is a demand, as long as you can get it out there, get your product marketed. If you got a new client come in and saying, "Hey, we just bought this land, we want to get started," tell them not to leave the day job, but maybe consider starting out fairly small. A half acre up to 1 acre would be a good starting point that they could test the waters. Maybe they decide, "Gosh, this is way more than I thought it was. I'm going to get out of it." Or, "Hey, this is not as bad as I thought. I've got good labor here. Maybe we got kids around that are going to help," and that's a rarity. We can expand. Maybe we can actually do this full time, but let them start out small. Don't just, start 10 acres of production. Otherwise, I think they're going to be in trouble. How much time do you have to commit? On a part-time basis, you're going to probably have to be out there virtually every evening doing something, particularly if you get into growing in high tunnels, which has been very popular. High tunnels are really not for part-time growers, even though you see them a lot. There's a huge temperature problem in high tunnels. They tend to heat up very quickly, and if you're not there to open up the sides or to get ventilation, you can lose that crop pretty quickly. So it's something you really have to keep an eye on. Okay, and then we talked about this. What resources do I already have? Do I have a lot of the equipment already on hand, or am I going to have to purchase this new or used? Then we get into all these legal issues, and I am not a lawyer and I don't have the expertise in this, but I consider some of these things that they might need to know about. Will you need a license? In some counties, yes, you'd have to have some type of business license to sell a commodity. Okay. Certainly, if you're spraying chemicals, you already know that. You would have to have possibly at least maybe a generalized license for pesticides, maybe a private license. If you're going to sell anything processed, jellies, any kind of cakes, any kind of processed fruit or vegetables, then you're going to need what's called a cottage food license through the Department of Agriculture, and that could involve inspections and so forth to see what your facilities are like. Then what are you going to call your product? We have a farm, and I'm not going to give a name, but not too far from us, that call their product organic. I know darn well they're not organic and they're not certified, so that's not a good thing. Eventually, it's going to catch up to them. But there are other names out there: natural grown, green grown, and so forth. Maybe you won't call it anything, but those are some considerations you'll want to go through with your growers. Then liability issues. Some of the more successful farms have done pick your owns, particularly on strawberries, blueberries, things like that. Some of them have incorporated what I call agritourism, where they're doing like hay rides, tractor rides, pumpkin patch, come out to this. But there's liability involved. So that's something you'll have to talk to them that, hey, they're going to definitely want some insurance. If, there's one pothole on your whole farm, someone will find that and step in it. And then, you're liable for damages and health bills and so forth. What about tax issues? Certainly, this is reportable income when you're making a profit, or even if you're not making a profit. That's something you'll have to tell them to get with their tax advisor. I would highly recommend, if they're going to, and this is not a cut down, but something like an HR block online, this or that, that just does standard form taxes. I think you want to steer away from that and find an accountant that is familiar with farm issues. That's what we do, and they know about the forms you have to have, what you can deduct, what you can't deduct, and so forth. So it'd be real important to find a good accountant that can help you with those type tax issues. Okay, we talked about what you're going to call yourself. If you're going to be certified organic, great. What are the advantages? Well, you can certainly sell that produce for more money. It's very marketable because people are looking for that word right now. Your average homeowner probably doesn't really know what that means. What we know, and you probably know, is certified organic means it's USDA inspected. It's a USDA program that you have to go through. It's a pretty stringent program. You will have site inspections. You will pay for certification. It's not that easy thing to do. You have to keep meticulous records on sprays. I normally try to talk most people out of it because they're not going to be able to keep up with it, or their history on their farm does not allow it to happen anytime soon. Another certification, which a lot of the growers in Georgia are using, is certified naturally grown. Now, this follows most of the practices of the organic certification. The only thing is it's not a certified organic label. It is actually board certified and policed basically by other farmers. So it's kind of an in-house type certification, but it seems to do very well. It's much less record keeping and not as tough as the organic side of things. So a lot of the farms have gone to this naturally organic grown, and certified naturally grown, but it is, it's still a few more hoops you have to jump through. You can call your farm anything outside of that, Cherokee grown, Bartow County grown, green grown. You can throw any name you want out there, and there's no regulation on that. All right, where are they going to sell it? Well, that's a good question that needs to be answered before they ever stick the first, carrot in the ground. Some folks have got the right location, and having a roadside stand might be of value. If you're way out in the middle of nowhere, it may not work very well. We have used an online market before over in Pike County where we'd actually list vegetables online, and we'd take those vegetables to a central location and folks would come pick them up. We never actually interacted with the customer per se. There was a couple of people that worked that site, and we just dropped it off and then they handled the customers. It worked out pretty well. The CSAs, that's worked for us before, and a lot of farms like that. It's where you'll advertise like a box of vegetables or a box of vegetables and fruit, and what comes in that week or whatever, or some people order every 2 weeks or whatever. That's what's in the box, and they pay a certain amount for that. From the grower standpoint, I like that because sometimes, you're not exactly sure what you're going to have, and at least you know that, hey, I'm going to be able to put this in the box and it's going to go to the clients. In other cases, sometimes you might want to do individual sales. Okay, we have tomatoes for this price and peppers for this price. It just depends. To get started, sometimes, you can go to your churches, neighbors, coworkers, might be interested in buying stuff. If you can work into the restaurant category of selling, that can work out very well, but I can tell you it's demanding. A couple of things you're going to have right up front. Most restaurants, you're going to have a refrigerated truck of some sort. So you're going to have to be able to get that produce in a refrigerated setting and clean and cool to that restaurant, and like every day or every couple of days. So that can be a tough one, but it can also be profitable. In some cases too, we've seen prisons, we've seen private school systems that are buying local produce, and that's another place maybe to market it and get it sold. But the key is a lot of this has to be thought through before they put the vegetables in the ground, because you could get stuck with a whole lot of something if you haven't planned that out. One other thing I'll throw out to you that we have done before. One year I planted just a bumper crop of sweet corn. I was like, there's no way I'm going to sell all this. And we took all we wanted to for our house and so forth. But going to a few larger CSA farms and small markets, I was able to actually sell that corn to another market that was able to bump up the price. And so we were selling it kind of wholesale to them and so forth. So, if there's already an established place, maybe your beginning growers can help kind of supplement them. All right. How do you price it? Good question. It takes some research. It's not just, this sells for this and this sells for that. I think they've got to go around, look at the farmers markets that are local or within a few counties, walk around, find out what everyone else is pricing. You certainly don't want to be undershooting everyone because A, you'll tick them off, and B, you're probably not making any profit. You're losing money. But, there's a price point. So you just have to work with that. And you guys are probably good sources of information for what things are selling for. You can go into grocery stores and see what things sell for there. That they're obviously buying it at wholesale prices and marking it up. And granted, a lot of times, yeah, you can buy vegetables cheaper at the grocery store, but it's not the freshness, it's not the quality. And what you're marketing here is, hey, this is locally grown. It hasn't come from Mexico, or California or wherever else. So that's what you have to sell, and that has got a value added to it. All right, what to grow? Sky's the limit. Everyone's got the basics out there. So if you want to grow the corn and the squash and so forth, that works good. I like to throw in some niche vegetables. I did a whole program at the Fruit and Growers Conference in Savannah this year on adding niche vegetables. And niche vegetables are things that are a little bit different. Whether you're talking about growing things like different asparagus varieties. Not a lot of people grow asparagus, but they actually can do quite well. It's a perennial vegetable. The Chinese cabbages sell well, even though they're a little different than the regular cabbage. Bok choy is another one that I'm thinking of. You have to market them. And one of the things I tell growers is, hey, you got something a little bit different, include it in their basket. Just put a free sample in there, say, hey, this is how you cook it, try it, see if you like it. A lot of times that will bring a sale the next week around. So think of ways that you can kind of help them out. Certainly the sweet corn, we've done whole programs on that, but go with some of the hybrid sweet corns that really hold the sugariness and can last for several weeks. That would be a little different than the everyday standard Silver Queen you see. All right, just quickly on fruits, what should you grow? You guys know about fruits. Certainly, I think I'd stay away from peaches unless you really want to be in a everyday spray program virtually. Apples and pears. The pears are certainly a little bit more forgiving. It's something that might do a little better up towards the North Georgia. Figs are actually fairly simple to grow. You plant a few figs. They're self-fertile, so they don't need any requirement for pollination. You might be able to sell figs. I think looking down this whole list, if I was going to just give someone something to start with, I would probably lean towards the brambles and also the blueberries. Blueberries, if you get the right soil, all about that, get them in the right place. They're probably the more simple crop to grow if you don't get hit by a late cold freeze like we're having. They don't need a lot of spraying. You could virtually grow them organic and get a harvest, and they sell well. We've marketed blueberries for many years and never had a problem selling them. Blackberries, raspberries are not a huge producer, but they're kind of neat to have, to throw a few in there. Blackberries do very well in Georgia, and you can have a quick market for that. Muscadines, again, are not difficult to grow, but they're a little bit of maintenance, or a lot of bit of maintenance. We've got them on our farm, and I haven't pruned mine yet. I need to get onto that like about yesterday, and it's just something I dread because it takes a long time to prune the muscadines. So that's just a quick sample of what you can have. But a lot of the vegetable growers that I see have got to where they add a little bit of fruit in there, whether they're getting it from some other location or they're growing their own. So it's good for you guys just to throw that out there. I don't have to spend a lot of time on this. Just you know that there are several fruit type plants that are going to have pollinators, and that's something that not everyone knows. And I was at a site yesterday actually, and the lady was asking about her apple trees. They never produced. I said, well, how many do you have there? She said, well, I just have one. And I said, okay, well, there's your problem. You probably have no pollination going on. As far as how to grow it, I don't have to spend a lot of time on that. But I will say that I've actually seen more and more raised bed scenarios, even on commercial small grower operations, because it just requires less time. Once you get them built, you can really put in some enhanced soil in there, some sterile type soil that the weed issue is not so bad. You don't have to have a ton of equipment. So if you had someone say, hey, I'm just thinking about getting into this on a really small scale, I would maybe think about going with raised beds. You can produce a lot of crop out of, even an eighth of an acre of raised beds. And it costs you a little bit more up front, but you're going to be saving on equipment, maintenance, and labor, because most of that can be handled, right from the side of the raised bed. It should be. So that's just a thought. Conventional wise, you know all about that. Need a good, well-drained site, hopefully somewhat level. Heavy red clay site can grow vegetables, but I would sure want to try to be amending it or pounding it with cover crops. Mention a little bit about this, and you'll probably get some questions about high tunnels. If you're not aware, NRCS Natural Resource has been offering a program for years where they give a cost share on high tunnels. It was designed for small grower operations, and it took off pretty well. Now, I can tell you, having been to a bunch of those, many of them right now are abandoned. They are just sitting there. maybe future county extension greenhouse structures that you can get cheaply. Why? Because people have no idea what it takes to run one of those. And I mentioned they can be great. The advantages are, you can trick the weather. You can get your vegetables in the ground 2 or 3 weeks early. The problem is the weather can catch you. You got a trip you got to make to work somewhere. You're a part-time grower. You got the high tunnels down because it was cold that night. And when you leave, it turns 80 degrees. If you're not there to raise those sides, you could fry the whole crop. So it's something that can be tricky. And it's something that you just have to, say, hey, if you're going to get into this, this is what you're looking at. Average high tunnel is going to cost somewhere about anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000. But you can get cost shares on that. Maybe it would be half that to the actual grower. But they are pretty popular. You're definitely going to have some way to irrigate. I'd say 9 times out of 10 they're going to irrigate with a drip system. Okay, just more hoopla right here. I just mentioned all of this. The one thing I was going to say, I think I was talking to Paul before the program, we're working with, if you go down to like the 4th little bullet there, fewer possible disease and insect issues. That can be true and it can be false. Sometimes if you get an outbreak inside that high tunnel, everything gets it. But the cool thing we're working at right now is we're looking at and have been working with is called exclusion tunnels. So we're using high tunnels and we're covering, I would say, about 3/4 of that high tunnel in plastic. But then on the sides and the ends, we actually have what turns out to be 50% shade cloth. That shade cloth, if you've seen it before, is a little bit dark colored, basically black, but it has holes in it. So, the degree of shade comes from how many holes are in there. We found that the 50% shade cloth, the holes are just large enough for many of the pollinators to make it through, but it stops things like leaf-footed bugs, stink bugs, squash bugs, and those type things from making it into the crop. So the deal is here, we're running a high tunnel, but now we actually have the sides sort of open all the time with this mesh material, the shade cloth, blocking those pesky insects. And I've been working with Auburn on this now for 2 years, and we see some extremely promising results. In fact, I just built a small one at my place just to test it and see how it does there. But it's just something, you can throw out there to them if they're thinking about a high tunnel. Say, hey, there's also something coming down the line called exclusion tunneling, if you will. And it's a way, and what we're looking for, particularly if you got cucurbits in there. Sometimes you'll see squash, cucumbers, and such planted in a high tunnel. You've got to get the pollination in there. And that's one way to do it. A little bit easier than, say, trying to run a beehive inside that high tunnel. Okay, some of the challenges we mentioned. It's kind of like, I've got grandkids and they go to daycare and seem like every other week they're coming home with a cold because everyone in there has it. You can have that problem in a high tunnel, a disease outbreak, or if insects are bad, they can multiply quickly, if you don't have any type of exclusion. We talked about the temperature. Wind problems, that's a big one. I have seen several high tunnels over the years blow over from wind or the plastic just be flapping up, and it's not fun to have to deal with that. We talked about the initial cost and then, of course, pollination issues. If you're growing primarily solanaceous in there, most of the solanaceous crops are going to be self-fertile, but you have to have breeze in there. You have to have wind to move around the pollen, like on tomatoes and peppers. I would cover with them just a little bit about equipment needs if they have nothing on hand. Certainly, you can get away on a very small operation with a tiller. If you're familiar with this one, this is like a commercial hand tiller. In fact, these are used in Europe a lot, and they call them tractors because they literally are PTO driven. You can put in different implements. You can see to the right, everything from a tiller to a hay baler you can get for these things. They can come different sizes. I've had several before, in our projects. You can even get one that's diesel, a huge one. They've got one up in Athens at the farm there. So, a really good sort of commercial tiller is what I'd be looking for on a home operation. If they're, going to try to be doing this for profit, these things are not cheap. You're looking at spending probably at the least around $2,500 and up to $5,000 or $6,000 on some of these tillers. The little cheap ones that you see, at the box stores, I mean, they could probably get you by for a year or two, but all that stuff eventually is going to break down. So it's just, it's a thought. I think by far handier as they start to expand a little bit is coming up with a compact tractor. Most of the commercial farms I go to have got some form of a tractor out there. You know, the three biggies that we think about right here, you can see the colors. You select your color you like, orange, blue, or green. A couple of things when I'm out there talking to a grower that's maybe getting started, I always recommend make sure you go ahead and just, and a lot of the smaller tractors will come with it, but get front four-wheel drive or front wheel assist. It'll just make that tractor act like it's bigger. It'll give you a lot more pulling power when you're doing some initial plowing or stuff. And I would highly recommend a front end loader because it's just so many different ways you can use that to move organic matter, compost, you name it. You can carry your supplies, your produce in the bucket. I've got a large and a smaller tractor on my farm, and that smaller one probably gets used 100 times more because it's just so handy to use it for multiple different things. You know, there's import tractors. I just throw this out here. If, you know, people are saying, well, I don't want to spend $25,000 or $30,000 on a John Deere tractor. Well, you know, for years out here in Griffin, we used a little Mitsubishi one up here that we got out of a grant. It was a refurbished tractor. I think we spent $5,000. It was four-wheel drive and had a bucket on it, and it did pretty well. The only complaint I had on it, I'm pretty good sized fella. If you've seen me, it was like it was designed for 5'5" people. So my little program assistant girl, she could get on that thing and do it just fine. I could work it, but I felt like I was on a tricycle. The Yarmar is a little bit bigger, you know, body wise, I think. And that's just another possibility. You know, you think Yarmar, it is an import tractor, but John Deere actually runs Yarmar motors in a lot of their smaller tractors. So it's a really good motor on those. And these things are going to be probably 1/3 to 1/4 the cost of some of the name brand ones we talked about earlier. You know, they're going to have some type of implements for those tractors. I would say the number one thing, in fact, I recommended this the other day to a grower, is get a tiller. It's a game changer when you've got a tiller on the back of the tractor versus a hand tiller. It's just so much nicer. You can do a lot of things with that tiller and really prepare the beds nicely. So if I could only have one implement, it would be a rear mounted tiller on a tractor. And try to, you know, there's different costs and calibers of quality. I would go for the highest quality you could afford because they take a lot of abuse, a lot of banging around there, and particularly if you got rocks in the garden, it'll beat it up. Next on my list, if I had to, you could use a push planter by hand, or, you know, if you can do a pretty good thing of corn and okra and this and that, maybe some type of a small dual planter of some sort. You can get a single, but I'd probably get two at least. Makes it easier to get good straight rows. So this is a Covington. You know, John Deere makes a Yetter. There are a lot of different ones out there. You're looking at probably, you know, a couple of grand for a good planter. So that's just another cost. Spreaders of some sort for putting out fertilizer, whether you be organic and or, you know, synthetic. Everything from running off an ATV to the back of a tractor and handheld would certainly be a possibility, but that's something you almost got to have. I talked about the planters. This is just examples of the push planters right here. And there's plenty of gardens that can be done with that. That's yours truly in the top up there. I'm running a coal push planter. That was kind of a really heavy duty, kind of an expensive one. That one on the bottom is an Earthway, which if you ever heard me give a garden talk, that's usually one I recommend for homeowners, and it does just fine on a small scale. A cultipacker is not a necessary item, but it's really nice to have, particularly if you've just got through, you know, plowing up the ground, tilling it, doing whatever. The ground can be kind of fluffy. And even though that sounds great, it's not the ideal seeding bed for planting seeds, cover crop, whatever. Running a cultipacker on top puts weight into it. It channels it. It kind of firms that soil up. And so I've got one of these at the farm. We use it all the time. And it's just another little neat thing to have. They're not overly expensive. You probably pick one up for under $1,000. If you got fruit trees or even vegetables, you're probably going to need to spray something, be it organic or otherwise. So, you know, all three of these I use all the time at my farm, but I've got a large tank mounted one that goes on the tractor. We've got a small one on the ATV. We use our ATV a lot for, particularly if we're going to spray like fence rows and things like that. And then a backpack sprayer of some sort. You know, you can get away with a 1 gallon pump sprayer, but you'll be filling it up continuously. You know, if you're spraying a halfway decent sized garden, a 1 gallon or 2 gallons is going to wear you out. A backpack sprayer probably the way to go. You can get them with motors on them, or, you know, hand pump them if you want to kind of build up your muscles. You'll have to talk to them right up front about how they're going to irrigate that thing, because if you're going to try to do this on dry land, you'll fail. So make sure they've got some system of watering, whether it does be overhead or, preferably maybe some type of a drip system. Then how are they going to fertilize it? A lot of the commercial farms will use, like we see in the bottom down there, some type of a liquid fertilizer that's going to be sent through the drip system. And that's a learning curve there. There are some simple solutions to that, but that's something you want to work with them on that. Are they going to use granular fertilizer maybe, or they want to go completely organic? If they're going to go organic, most organic growers are going to use a liquid form of organic fertilizer and inject it rather than putting out, manure and products like that. But it is something you're really going to have to address with them and maybe help them design how much irrigation do I need and where the cost for that. Okay, I throw this one in here because it's a really handy thing for small growers, a utility cart. Some people got the really expensive, the $10,000 model on the bottom right or higher. I bought my wife the one up top up there to the left. We have one almost just like that. We had a refurbished EasyGo cart. I think it came out of a golf course. It's actually got an electric dump bed on the back, and we have had that for years. And that thing has done more service than I could think of. And it's just another little handy item to have on the farm. You can carry your bushels of corn that you harvested in the back of that thing. You can carry your sacks of manure, whatever you want to do. Just another, not have to have, but it's really nice to have when it comes to growing a large scale of vegetables. All right, some type of working facility if you're going to be commercial, and it really depends. If it's organic, it's going to have to be inspected. But you got to have a way. If you got a bunch of vegetables coming in, and they're not going out the door that second, you got to store them. At our farm, we used a number of refrigerators, but you've got to have some way to keep it cool, harvested, in the shade, and maybe washed, particularly, if you're going to be doing any kind of a production of these vegetables or processing. You better have a clean wash area for that. These are some things people don't think of, but they're going to have on hand. Could spend the whole day talking about the challenges, weeds, disease, insects. We talked a little bit about exclusion tunnels, but these are just some things you'll have to make them cognizant of if they're not already, that, hey, you are going to have problems. We're in Georgia. It's humid. We get a lot of disease, a lot of insect pressure, and weeds galore. So that's one thing you're going to have to look at. Some folks will say, hey, I've heard, a lot of the commercial and organic farms grow on plastic. And so you can talk to them about that. It's another added expense. Your average plastic layer, like you see on top left up there, is going to run about $3,500. The thing on the bottom is actually a plastic remover, because that stuff is really hard. The soil's bedding over it. You can barely pull it up by hand. So you have to have some way to get that plastic up. That plastic's only going to usually last for one growing session. And I say session, either a spring or fall garden. Rarely do you get, 2 times the use out of it. So the plastic advantage is it warms the soil up, it protects for weeds, but you're going to have drip irrigation under it. The only thing I don't like, if drip ever goes bad, you get a cut in it or a mouse chews on it, you have to find that's where it is, because you can't hardly see through there. We've talked about this in programs before, but you might encourage them using some type of weed fabric, something to block the weeds out, give them a kind of a dry walking place while the vegetables are growing in between. So there are different options out there. Using cover crops, some of the new trends, not real new, but new in Georgia, are roller crimping, strip tilling, are some other organic-y methods of controlling weeds that can do pretty good under the right circumstances. I do that a lot in my own garden. In fact, that is my garden up top left there. So it is a different way to control weeds and protect the soil from eroding. Of course, mulch, herbicide when it comes to weeds. And the reason I spend so much time on weeds, I think that's one of the main issues and one of the big failures I see on new gardens. Particularly growers get out there and they've done a really good job of selecting varieties and planting whatever, and they had no idea how much weeds they were going to have to deal with. And those weeds will overtake that real quick, and then all of a sudden the crop fails. So, you guys know all about the herbicides that are potential. The one actually I have up there says natural weed preventer. That was probably corn gluten. I think I would stay the heck away from that one. Does not do very well. But, mulching on a smaller scale can be well suited towards towards control. On a large farm, normally mulching is not used a whole lot unless it's some type of a, like we talked about, a plastic type mulch or permeable weed control. All right, there's the lads and the lattices from back when they were young. They're both grown now. Well, that's back when I had labor in the garden, and that labor has long since gone. But with that, Mr. Paul, I kind of wanted to finish up early in case we get some questions. That's just a real quickie overview. I know there sounded like some negativity in there, but been there, done that. It's not an easy venture, but for someone who truly wants to get into it and loves it, at least you've got a few tools here, where you can steer them in the right direction. And potentially, it's a lifestyle, and that's what you have to tell them. Hey, we never go short on vegetables in the wintertime because we've got all that stuff put up and the cream corn and everything else. And we've been doing it for many years, and a lot of growers have. And that's the biggest thing they do it for, is we really enjoy it. We get our own produce, and we're able to make a little bit of money selling it. So Paul, I don't know how if you want folks just to chime in or type in a question to you and you can tell me, but I will sit back and listen.
Thanks, Bob. I did see one question in the chat box from Brenda concerning the smaller compact tractors. Are they problematic as far as plowing alongside those types of tractors from your experience?
Okay, I heard about the tractor, but what was the question? Were they what?
The compact type tractors, I guess running an attachment on those, is that problematic or?
Oh, no. One thing I'd recommend, they'll pull a small plow, like a single plow, if you really had to do deep tilling, or an all-purpose plow. You'll have to make, if you're familiar with that, like a shank plow, you'll have to make several passes if it's hard, rough ground. But they can pull. You'd be amazed what power they have, because it's all in the transmission in these things. A lot of those small tractors are going to run somewhere between 21 to 28 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot, considering you look at a big commercial tractor like the one I have at the house is like 125 horsepower, and they get way bigger than that. But these small tractors with that transmission can do a lot. Has no problem running a 5-foot tiller. Mostly 5-foot and below equipment would work fine on that. And that the lifting power of that front end bucket, if you get it's tremendous too. I mean, you'd be amazed what you can lift with that. So I think for the small grower operation, that's all they would probably need, and some for that. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
My question dealt more with like using one of those in the high tunnel and reaching the sides and being able to turn inside the high tunnel.
Oh, okay, yeah. So most high tunnels do not use tractors inside of them. And the main reason is because most of them have a door, like, a person door to get into. So you might break the ground and get it ready prior to putting the high tunnel up. But once the high tunnel's up, you're not going in there with a tractor. That's where the hand tillers sometimes come into play. In most cases, once the high tunnel's established, very little equipment goes in there other than hand type equipment. Good question.
I remember touring a facility near Athens one time that had high tunnels on like a track system. They can move them around. And then
that would work. Yeah. Almost like they do, they do chickens like that too, don't they? Where you've got the movable chicken thing. And yeah, I hadn't seen that on the high tunnels, but I don't see why you couldn't do that.
Bob, do we have enterprise budgets for small scale vegetable production?
So they are working, I say they, and the economist, and what is the lady's name?
Amanda.
Yes, Amanda Smith. In fact, I talked with her. We did that program at winter school where it was like how to make money on 10 acres or something like that, which is great. I really enjoyed that program. And they are working on budgets right now. I am actually working on a fact sheet right now on something very similar, like, and it'll be addressing this stuff, like what are the costs and stuff to get into small market growing. I do have a publication on getting into small market growing, but it's not a ton of stuff that has to do with the, the actual money. But to answer your question, I know they are working on something right now. It's in production, and I don't think it's done yet, but they're working on it. And that's, through the economics.
Hey, Bob, what varieties of sweet corn would you recommend for somebody wanting to do, more than a garden size, but, couple acres for local market?
Yeah, so I would definitely go with like the double or triple sweets, and I can give you some specific names we've grown. Every year, companies will send us ones to trial and test. If you don't want to have to remember this, every year I include them into if you just go to our homegrown sweet corn publication, the varieties in there are also grown commercially, so it's not like it's just for homeowners. But you'll see down there where we talk about the more hybridized corn. I like one called Motalk, which is like Mautack, which is kind of Indian name. It's a super corn. Another one called Serendipity. These are ones that have got, when I say multi-gene, there's 3 basic gene types: sugary, which is, your Silver Queen is SU, SE, sugar enhanced. That would be like Silver King, peaches and cream. Ones that you might be familiar with are really, really good corns. They're improved over the Silver Queen. Then we get the SH2, which is a shrunken corn. That's a super sweet corn. The advantage of it is it stores that sugar really a long time, so you can keep it in the refrigerator and still have good sweet corn. Disadvantage of it is it doesn't like cold soils. You have to wait longer to plant it. What we found is, hey, we like the attributes of some of the SU, some of the SC, SH2. So what some of the researchers have done is they've crossed them, and now we've got multi-gene corn that contains usually a lot of sweet corn gene in it, super sweet, with a little bit of SC and sometimes some SU genes. And that's the ones I like, the ones that have got the best of all the worlds, because you get all the vigor and flavor and texture along with the storability. And if I'm growing commercially, I want to be able to, pick my sweet corn and maybe hold it in the refrigerator and still be able to sell it a week or 2 from now. Unlike Silver Queen, that you better get out that door in the next 2 days or it's going to be bad. So hope that makes sense. But if you look at that publication, Homegrown Sweet Corn, there'll be a number of varieties listed in there that have done very favorable for us.
One more piece of equipment that I was thinking about, since these small scale operations are so dependent on small tillers.
Yes.
Some sort of a subsoiler attachment to come back every few years and rip it up.
Right, and that's where I'd mentioned it, but a lot of people have different names for it. Some call it a spring tooth harrow, but that is sort of a subsoiler. A true subsoiler for a small tractor, I would put in the category, if you're familiar with a potato plow. I don't think, there's a moldboard plow. These tractors are probably going to have a tough time pulling a moldboard plow, but a potato plow or a center buster plow, they could do it. Those are really cheap pieces of equipment. You probably get one for under $200. So you could really rip the soil with that. The all-purpose plow, I've got one at home. It's got 36-inch arms on it, but it runs off the big tractor. The smaller tractor, if you got one of these standard 4 or 5 foot shank plows, or what all-purpose plows they call them, you'll have to make several passes if it's hard clay, but you could probably rip down, I would say, down to at least 10, 12 inches with that, and then come over the top. You could use a harrow, but a harrow doesn't really smooth it up near as much as a tiller, so I'd rather invest in the tiller. And so if I was going to get 2 pieces of ground-breaking preparing equipment, like you said, I would probably get the all-purpose plow, the shank plow, along with the tiller. Does that make sense? Other questions? I guess everybody's ready to go into the vegetable business.
There's a question from Roger in the chat.
Yeah, the question from Roger is, in peak season, you're harvesting a lot of produce, trying to maintain your freshness. Is refrigeration cost effective on a small scale?
Yeah, so you're really going to have refrigeration. Example, like when we were selling asparagus, you can actually hold asparagus for like a week and they're still very marketable if you've got refrigeration. Things like cucumbers and squash, they go in the refrigerator and hold for about a week period, maybe not quite a week. Outside of that, if you were storing them, let's just say on your kitchen table or in a barn, you're talking about a matter of a day or 2 and those things start to go south. So I don't know if the cost effectiveness, I would have to almost put this into necessity, unless you somehow, are doing 100% pick your own, which most vegetable farms are not doing, or, you are picking that harvest and getting it out the door that day and taking it somewhere. If there's any, possibility, which there usually is, that there's going to be a delay in the customer getting to that vegetable per se, you better have a way to keep it cool. It doesn't take like, a $10,000 refrigerator to do this. In our shop, most of the refrigerators in there are used ones or ones someone was giving away. They're like, $50 refrigerator that does the job for that season. And then when we're done, we unplug them. So now we do beef as well, but we got a commercial freezer for that. But as far as the vegetables go, I mean, we're just using regular refrigerators. You can certainly spend as much as you want to, and a larger operation probably would, but just having a place to store those vegetables for even a couple of days will pay big dividends.
All right, that's all the questions I saw in the chat box. It's the last chance if y'all have any other questions for Bob.
I heard something, but I don't know if that was a question coming through. I certainly didn't catch it. So
That was background noise in my office. Sorry about that.
we'll answer it.
Well, seeing no other questions, Bob, we appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today. And this was a very informative class. A lot of us were anxious to hear this one at Winter Conference this year, and I'm glad we had a chance to come back and revisit this. So.
Well, most enjoyable. I just want to kind of end saying, guys, I'm always available. You shoot me an email. I try to get back really fast. And, if you need a field visit or whatever, and we're still traveling, so I can't afford $5 a gallon very much longer, but as long as I can, I'll come out and visit with you. I love field visits, so don't hesitate to call me.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, and y'all have a good day.
Everybody take care.